call you names. We're going to yell at you and call your names. Welcome back. Welcome back. You are listening to Lurie Daniel Favors on SiriusXM's Urban View, where talk empowers and becomes action. I'm also doing this on YouTube. I forgot to mention that, and I didn't pre-schedule the YouTube, so you're not going to necessarily get a notification. Except you now know, because I just told you. But yeah, welcome back. That was one of many of the quite raucous hearings, or should I say town halls, that Republican I was going to say executive directors, that Republican elected officials have been hosting over the course of the past weekend, where they have been getting it handed to them, and not by the blacks, by the whites, who are quite upset about the threats to their democracy as they know it. Now, here's the thing. Here's the thing, y'all. That clip that you just heard, YouTube, sorry, you guys did not hear the clip. But Urban View just heard a clip where there were several female voters in the audience who were basically saying, why do you have a problem with me trying to vote? I am a voter, or at least I would be a voter. I might not be a voter in the future because of the SAVE Act, which you co-sponsored. And they were doing it in all of their pink pussy hat power. I mean, it is like, it's real. Oh, I guess that's a different party, because that pink pussy hat stuff was the Democrats. Well, whatever. Republican women are having an awakening. And it's a beautiful thing. Now, y'all, even though I have been saying a lot of that's not our business, we're not involved in this, you're going to let them other people handle it. This is actually something that's pretty significant. The SAVE Act, which I've mentioned before, I want to spend just a few minutes sort of deep diving into this, because it is a real situation. Now, you have to understand that the people who are promoting the SAVE Act are using the fiction of non-citizen voting. And they're saying that they need this SAVE Act to save the votes, because the SAVE Act, which stands for Safeguarding American Voter Eligibility, is a major, in addition to like making these tax cuts permanent, which they can only do by cutting your grandmama's Social Security. Well, hell, cutting all our Social Security, because I'm going to need that one day. Shout out to the Social Security beneficiaries. But in addition to cutting, housing and hospitals and healthcare and job opportunities and programs and all the things that they're kind of putting under that fake title DEI, which we've already debunked, they're also very much committed to this particular piece of legislation, the SAVE Act, Safeguard American Voter Eligibility. It is a priority for them. Now, they say that they need this act to be passed into law because they don't want the immigrants voting. And they don't want to have the mean old bad migrants voting. Now, here's the thing. If we had an issue with non-citizen people voting, then maybe this would make a little bit of sense, but we're going to talk about why it absolutely does not. But it doesn't make a lot of sense because according to the Brennan Center, one of my favorite research organizations for civil and social justice type work, the Brennan Center has found that in only 0.0001, that's 3 zeros, in 0.001% of jurisdictions surveyed after the 2016 election was there any notification or indication that a non-citizen had voted. The Heritage Foundation, which like authored and like the spawn of Satan, skeeted its policies into Project 2025. Heritage Foundation also talks about non-citizen voting, but what the Heritage Foundation has also done is tracked voting fraud and election fraud cases for decades. And they have only found between the years of 2002 and 2023, they have only found 85 cases of alleged non-citizen voting, which means this is a non-motherfucking issue. Okay, to quote, what's that sister's name? Eva Longoria. I always mess up her name, but she was in Basketball Wives, and she was like, "You are non-motherfucking factor." Whatever she said, I can't remember her name. But this is a non-motherfucking factor. Okay, this sort of voting is not happening. So why are Republicans pushing this act? Well, mainly because they don't like women. I know it's hard to believe, but they're giving small dick energy, and I'm going to explain to you why. The SAVE Act, being completely unnecessary, is essentially a piece of legislation that allows for a backdoor to massive amounts of voter disenfranchisement. Except now, they're not trying to disenfranchise the blacks. They're not trying to disenfranchise los Latinos or our Asian brothers and sisters. No, they are trying to disenfranchise the women, the pink pussy hat people wearing, and whether you wore a hat or not, they are trying to disenfranchise women from voting. They don't want you to vote. And this is legislation, because of the way it's crafted, that could essentially prevent nearly 70 million women from voting. Now, that is significant because women, far more than men, if they are voters, are more likely to vote for policies that Democrats put forward. Okay, I didn't make up them rules. I didn't say it. That's what they say. That's just what it is. So the reality is that this is a real concerted effort, because in order to pass muster, in order to get a right to vote, in order to register to vote under the SAVE Act, you have to have documents like your birth certificate or a passport that matches your name at birth. Now, if you are like me, and you've been married, and blessed be the name of the Lord. I love me that man. And I'm married to this man, and I had changed my name for this man. Well, technically, I added his name to my last name because I've been a Daniel my whole life. And I was like, well, we can't, I mean, I'm going to need to add yours to mine because I can't just give up I've been a Daniel my whole life. And, just because me and my daddy had some issues before he rested in peace. God bless you, ancestor. The fact is I'm a Daniel. So I needed to add my husband's name. So I am Lurie Daniel Favors, which is why the show is called the Lurie Daniel Favors Show. But I don't have my birth certificate in Lurie Daniel Favors. My birth certificate is Lurie Daniel. My passport is in Lurie Daniel Favors, but the vast majority of people do not have a passport. In order to register to vote, if the SAVE Act were to pass, you are going to have a piece of documentation that confirms who you are that matches the name on your birth certificate if you don't have a passport. Have you seen the prices for passports? They are expensive, prohibitively so. And so the reality is the vast majority of Americans don't have them. And according to, again, the Brennan Center, there are 1/3 of American women of all the races that do not have access to any documents with their current legal name. About half of Americans generally don't have a passport because, again, it's expensive, and Americans aren't known for their international travel. So, savvy. You were just not. And so 8 in 10 women who are married took their spouse's last name. So they didn't just add their spouse's last name to their name like I did for mine. 8 out of 10 married women actually took their spouse's last name. And so this bill, this SAVE Act, which requires you in order to register to vote to have documentation that confirms your birthplace that is in the same name that you currently have, that means you ain't voting. Now, to those of you who think the way I do, which is, I think, very rationally. Okay, rationally. But for those of you who think the way I do, it's kind of like, this is a little extreme, don't you think? Like, why on earth would they be passing this legislation? Surely the legislation can't be that bad if it's going to disenfranchise that many people. This seems really over the top. This seems very non-democratic. Well, here's the challenge that we're facing. You are not a white Christian nationalist. And you are not a part of the 7 mountains reality. You do not believe in headship voting. And I'm going to explain these things to you and we're actually going to be talking more and more about them on this show and on the podcast, which launches next week. Shout out to the podcast and the podcast team. The podcast is called Lurie Breaks It Down for obvious reasons. So we'll be diving more into this topic over the course of my time on the podcast. But for this show, and for all of you amazing people who listen every day, I need you to understand that white Christian nationalism isn't just about the white. It's also about the Christian nationalism part. And in white Christian nationalism, this is a very patriarchal view of the world. Now, to my Black Christians, to my religious folk, I know that you have been trained, as was I, to believe that the man is the head of the house. And many of you still believe that. Fortunately, the Lord has delivered me from such nonsense because my Lord and Savior reminds me that we are partners in this thing. And there are some things which my spouse should definitely lead because God bless him, he's a good man. But then there are things that I should definitely lead because God bless me, I'm a good woman. And together we make an amazing partnership, right? And so there is a balance, and this is just us. Everybody ain't got a relationship like this. So I'm not saying that my type of relationship is the best type of relationship. I'm just telling you that my type of relationship would not count as a quality relationship for the white Christian nationalists because they believe very much in a patriarchal understanding of Christianity, a xenophobic understanding of Christianity. And according to the New Republic, they explain it like this. Christian nationalism is concerned with maintaining a hierarchical social order and excluding others from access to power. They note that Samuel Perry, who is a sociologist of religion, at the University of Oklahoma, notes that Christian nationalism uses the language of faith to defend a social arrangement that American conservatives readily stand behind. He says women under men, this is the hierarchy, okay? Envision this. Women under men, children under parents, workers under their bosses, laity under their pastors, and citizens under the authority of a Christian magistrate. So when we had people like, who is it, Chris Webben, who was asked, and we're going to talk about him in just a second as well. He was asked last year, in a white Christian nationalist world, are women voting? And his answer, which we played on these airwaves, was no, absolutely not. Because if women are voting, we will not have a white Christian nationalist nation in another 50 years. Because women tend to vote thinking about the whole. Men, particularly white cis hetero men who are socialized in a white Christian nationalism patriarchy, do not think about the whole. They think about themselves. And under a white Christian nationalist reality, women would not vote if they're well, you wouldn't vote at all. But if you're married, you would cede your vote to your husband. And you would trust that your husband is going to go into that voting booth and pass legislation and vote for legislation and vote for elected officials who are in alignment with family values. The problem is because you ceded your vote to the husband and the husband has the right to vote on behalf of the family, that means white men get all the votes. You see how this works? It's a problem. But did you hear that other part? It's women under men, children under their parents, workers under their bosses, because white Christian nationalism doesn't limit it to your own household. Like if you believe in your household that you should be the head and she should be the tail, or whatever you believe, I don't care. Do what you got to do in your household. If you like it, I love it. The problem with white Christian nationalism is that they don't limit it to just their households. They believe this is a societal mandate. So workers in a white Christian nationalist reality sit up underneath the authority granted by white Christian nationalist Jesus of their bosses. Which is why a few years ago, when Hobby Lobby took that case to the Supreme Court, where they said that they did not believe that the women who work for them should be able to access birth control, because in their perspective, as the owners of the company, they did not want to pay for birth control because it was against their religious values. And their religious values did not see that the good Lord wanted them to pay for insurance for people to have access to birth control, because they believe that all life should be allowed to manifest into a baby. They went all the way to the Supreme Court on that. And they are a part of this white Christian nationalist reality. So if you are not a part of the hierarchy, you're a problem for the white Christian nationalists. Like me, I'm a problem. Like people who emote like me, who have vaginas and breasts, and who identify as women and who identify as power women, we are a problem to people in the white Christian nationalist reality. They go on to say in the article, this is also one of the reasons that transgender and non-binary people also pose such a threat. I know a lot of y'all have been like, there ain't but 1% of trans people in the country. Why everybody so worried about the trans community? Oh, hold on, Jonah. I might need you to hit the let me clear my throat thing because I gotta. So, 1 second. We got to do that every so often when a frog tries to come from my throat. So, but as I was saying, what was I saying? Oh, right, under the magistrate. Okay, so in their world of white Christian nationalism, it also extends to the workplace and it extends to basic citizens. So when Chris Webben a few years ago, or last year, said that women would not be voting in a white Christian nationalist reality because women would vote such that they would not have a white Christian nationalist reality, what they're saying is we know that white Christian nationalism ain't got nothing to do with equality. We are not trying to be equal. We are not trying to be equitable. We want white men in charge of this white nation, which we stole from the indigenous and we had made it our own. And that's what they believe. And so these are people who are very empowered by the notion of a SAVE Act. And quite frankly, there are many couples in the country already living with this reality. There are many women in this country in marriages like this, where they have been socialized to believe that this is the way your household should be run. Many of them who are in agreement with this. And again, baby, Susie, Karen, no, I can't do Karen. Susan, Becky, Annie, if you don't want to vote and you want to secede your pink pussy power to your husband, child, go ahead and do that. We do things differently in the melanated side of the world. I remember being on the call where we had to answer the call, the 44,000. And then, after that call, sponsored by Women with Black Women, then do you remember all the other calls that started and the white women had a call? And I joined the white women's call, and I was like, y'all be looking at our stuff. I want to see what y'all talking about. And there was this whole segment where white women were saying, well, I'm not allowed to be politically active or civically active. And so like when I'm going to be civically engaged, I tell my husband I'm going to the book club. And the book club is really it's a whole ass lie that these white women have to tell their husbands, because at the book club, they're doing things like joining indivisible groups. They're doing things like figuring out how to vote strategically in opposition to their husbands. It is a whole thing. And I was like shocked. And me and the other Black women who were on the call were like, oh my God, y'all got to hide your political engagement for your husband? Jiminy, Christmas on a cracker. So the reality is, this is why the trans community is considered a threat. They make up less than 1% of the population, but they, the transgender and non-binary community, they defy this very notion of white Christian heterosexual leadership and dominance, which is one of the reasons why white Christian nationalists are very concerned about the rise in power and the perceived power of the trans and non-binary community. So Christian patriarchy is something that really began to strengthen in the 1980s, according to the New Republic. Really fascinating article. And when Christian civil rights and organizations began when Christian civil rights organizations began to expand, so did this idea that women should be obedient to their husbands, and that was mandated by God. That was mandated by God. So in 1998, we remember, some of you who were alive then, the Southern Baptist Convention was the nation's largest and most powerful evangelical body. They adopted rules that said women should, quote, submit herself graciously to her husband's leadership, and that a man should provide for, protect, and lead his family. In 2000, the Baptist Faith and Message, which is their governing articles, clarified that the office of pastor, elder, overseer, mm, that's a blast from the past in terms of framing, overseer is limited to men as qualified by the scripture. Which means if you have a vagina, if you have a uterus, and you were born with those things, or you now have those things because you have transitioned into that space, the point is you ain't supposed to have no power. Jonah, hit the button again one more time, sis. Listen, y'all, all I'm gonna say is when you get a cold or a flu in this new America, that ish be lasting. I ain't been sick in a long time and I still got the sound of stuffiness. Thank you, Jonah. I appreciate you. We have to clear our throats a lot. Anyway, getting back to this because we only have a few minutes left before the man cut us off for this segment. So I'd mentioned the name Chris Webben, or not. I've been calling him Chris Webben. His name is Joel Webben. I'm so sorry, Chris is out there, except the Chris from Maryland that I had to read because he was a troll. It's on YouTube. You can hear it. Joel Webben. Joel Webben is the one who said that women would not be voting in a white Christian nationalist reality. But he is also a pastor. He's a pastor who has 120,000 YouTube subscribers. Speaking of YouTube, I think we're going to hit 45,000 subscribers today. This is awesome. This is amazing. Thank you all, YouTube. We appreciate y'all. We really do. We appreciate even more when you share it and then you come on over to the Urban View side so you can hear the whole thing. That was just a little segue. Yes, thank you, Jonah. So anyway, he's got 120,000 YouTube subscribers, and he has argued for removing women. Like, you might currently be in a position of civil power or leadership, but you should not be there. So he believes that you should remove women from those spaces. He has a sermon where he talked about forbidding his wife from reading a book because he hadn't had a chance to review it yet. That is massively small dick energy to me. I'm sorry. But he literally says in the sermon, you're not going to outpace me. Like, dude, are you that threatened? Are you that threatened by the possibility that the woman in your life might have an intelligent thought that you did not first authorize for her, that you will not allow her to read books that you have not had a chance to read? And because you're giving such small dick energy, I doubt you're reading that many books. That's just me. That's just me. So anyway, they have argued for a repeal of the 19th Amendment. They support that household headship voting system where men vote on behalf of their families, not the black ones, just the white ones. And so basically they are saying that the units of society are not individuals, but the households. This is one of the reasons why Project 2025 also prioritizes services and benefits for married couples, heterosexual couples. And they disfavor single families or single parent families. They disfavor families that do not fit that nuclear family reality. And essentially, this is an age-old system. These people are really committed to this. They are dedicated to it, and they are about to pass legislation that is going to make this law. So I don't want us to count on the courts. I don't want us to count on, because we don't know how long the courts are going to hold. And once we move beyond the district level and get to the federal level, the appellate level of this, I said federal level, I meant to say appellate level courts, it's a different ballgame. Once it gets up to the Supreme Court, tell me Samuel Alito, Clarence Thomas, the biggest hoes on the court, are not going to sign off on this. White Christian nationalists like John Roberts, tell me they're not going to sign off for this. The folks who are a part of the Federal Society 6, the Amy Coney Barrett's, and I don't know how she votes. I don't know how she feels about this issue. That's something we should look out for. Either way, she ain't got enough votes, even if she joined with all the women. Elena Kagan, Sonia Sotomayor, and my soror, Ketanji Brown Jackson, the justice. Even if she were to side with them, that's 4 votes. You got to have 5 in this reality in order to make sure that you can defeat this sort of legislation. So the reality is, this is a big freaking deal. So once again, I'm asking you all to get on the 5 Calls app, to contact your elected officials, to email them, to call them, to at them on social media, to make appointments with them, to barrage them, to not just make an appointment with them by yourself, but bring your mama, your cousin, your auntie, and your friends. Bring your sorors, bring your fraternity brothers, bring everybody, your civic groups, bring everybody. If you in the NCNW, bring all the NCNW. If you in the Order of the Eastern Star, bring all the orders of the Eastern Star, the Sistren. If you the Mason, bring the Mason. Come on, everybody. We need everybody to engage, because let me tell you something. Well, we ain't doing in the melanated side of the line. We ain't doing. Child. We ain't doing this. We ain't doing this thing with y'all. And I don't, again, when I know we got some Black Christians who are very much in the patriarchal view of things, child, you go ahead and be as patriarchal as you need to be. You submit to that small dick energy. I shouldn't say that, because if you're in agreement, maybe you got small ovarian energy, whatever. It doesn't matter. The point is, legislatively, we cannot allow this to happen. Call. email, make appointments and visit and show up unannounced. We got to let these people know y'all not going to take this small dick energy and legislate it such that we now have to deal with it for the next several generations. You done already took our reproductive justice. You done already took our voting rights. What you ain't going to take is my uterine right to vote. Sorry. Sometimes I crack corny jokes and it makes me laugh. We got to go to commercial break. We will take your calls at 866-80182. Look at this. We got lines full. 866-801-8255. 866-801-TALK. We will take all your calls before we bring on Professor Tanya Evans to talk about the crypto craziness that's happening right now. Much more to come on the Lurie Daniel Favors Show. YouTube, thank you for getting us to 45,000. We appreciate y'all. We'll be right back after this.